My daughter is the family failure, Mom announced to the entire living room, her voice dripping with satisfaction as she held up her wine glass. I stood frozen in the doorway of my parents' house in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, my hands clutching the homemade pie I had brought for Christmas dinner. Everyone turned to stare at me. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely recognized, their faces a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment. I forced my lips into something resembling a smile. "I'd like you to meet someone," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. "My name is Charlene, and I'm 35 years old. For as long as I can remember, my mother has made it her personal mission to remind me, and anyone within earshot, that I'm a disappointment, single at 35, no children, working at a bakery instead of having a real career. The list of my failures, according to her, could fill volumes. That Christmas dinner was supposed to be different. I had promised myself it would be the last time I would let her humiliate me in front of the family. I had a secret, something that would change everything. But as I stood there watching her smirk at me over the rim of her glass, I realized she had no idea what was coming. The trouble started years ago, probably when I turned 30 and still hadn't gotten married. Mom had always been critical, but something shifted then. At every family gathering, she found new ways to point out my shortcomings. At my cousin's wedding, she told the bride's mother that at least her daughter had found someone willing to marry her. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, she asked loudly if I was planning to die alone with cats. I didn't even like cats. My younger sister Diane had always been the golden child. She got married at 23 to a dentist named Gregory, popped out 2 kids before she turned 30, and now lived in a pristine house in the suburbs. Mom never missed an opportunity to compare us, usually with me standing right there. "Diane knows how to make a man happy," she would say. "That's why she has such a beautiful family." I tried arguing back at first, tried defending my choices. But Mom had a way of twisting everything I said, making me sound defensive and pathetic. So I learned to stay quiet, to smile and nod and count the minutes until I could leave. The bakery where I worked wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. I had started there 10 years ago as a part-time assistant while figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. Turns out, I wanted to make bread. Good bread. The kind that made people close their eyes when they took the first bite. My boss, Helen, had taught me everything she knew. And when she retired 5 years ago, she helped me buy the business from her. Mom never acknowledged that I owned the bakery. To her, I was just working at some shop. She never asked about my life, never visited the bakery, never seemed interested in anything I did unless it involved embarrassing me in front of relatives. This Christmas was supposed to be different because of Ethan. I had met him 8 months ago when he came into the bakery looking for a specific type of sourdough his grandmother used to make. He was in town for business meetings, staying at a hotel downtown. We talked for 20 minutes about bread, of all things, and he came back the next day, and the day after that. Ethan lived in Seattle but traveled constantly for work. He was quiet, thoughtful, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We started dating long distance, which was difficult, but somehow worked. He made an effort to visit Milwaukee whenever he could, and I flew out to see him twice. I hadn't told my family about him. Part of me wanted to protect what we had from Mom's inevitable criticism. Part of me was terrified that if I brought him home, she would somehow ruin it. But Ethan insisted on meeting them, said he wanted to be part of my life completely. So I had agreed to bring him to Christmas dinner. The plan was simple. I would arrive first to help with preparations, and he would show up an hour later. I wanted to gauge the situation, make sure Mom was in a decent mood before introducing him. That plan fell apart the moment I walked in and heard Mom already holding court in the living room, telling stories about my failures to anyone who would listen. "She's 35 and still single," Mom was saying as I entered. Can you believe it? I don't know where I went wrong with that one. My Aunt Patricia made a sympathetic sound. "Some women just aren't meant for marriage, I suppose." "It's not that," Mom continued. "It's that she has no ambition, no drive. She works at a bakery, for heaven's sake. What kind of man wants a woman who smells like yeast all day? Diane, sitting on the couch with her perfect hair and perfect outfit, said nothing. She never defended me, but she also never joined in Mom's attacks. She just existed in her bubble of perfection while I took the hits. That's when I walked into the room with my pie, and Mom decided to make her grand announcement about me being the family failure. The words hung in the air like a bad smell. I could feel my face burning, could sense everyone's discomfort and their reluctance to meet my eyes. But I had Ethan, and I had a plan. The memories of past Christmas dinners flooded back as I stood there holding that pie. There was the year Mom bought Diane an expensive necklace and got me a cookbook titled Cooking for One. There was the Christmas she asked loudly if I was planning to freeze my eggs before it was too late. Every holiday brought a fresh humiliation, a new reminder that I wasn't living up to her standards. I had spent 35 years trying to earn her approval. I excelled in school, got good grades, stayed out of trouble. But none of it mattered because I wasn't Diane. I wasn't married with kids. I wasn't following the exact path Mom had laid out for me. The bakery became my sanctuary. Helen, my former boss and mentor, had been more of a mother to me than my own mom ever was. When she decided to retire, she sat me down in the back office and told me she wanted me to buy the business. "You have a gift," she said, "and I won't watch you waste it because you're too afraid to believe in yourself." I was terrified. Taking out a loan, becoming a business owner, it felt impossible. But Helen believed in me, and somehow that made me believe in myself. I worked with a local bank, got the loan approved, and bought the bakery. That was 5 years ago, and every year since had been better than the last. Mom never came to the grand reopening. She never asked how business was going. She never acknowledged that I had done something difficult and succeeded at it. To her, I was still just working at a bakery, nothing more. Ethan changed everything. When he first walked into the bakery that day in April, I almost didn't notice him. It was the morning rush, and I was covered in flour, frantically trying to keep up with orders. He waited patiently in line, and when he got to the counter, he asked if we had a traditional San Francisco-style sourdough. "My grandmother used to make it," he explained. "I've been looking for something similar for years." I didn't have exactly what he wanted, but I offered to make a custom loaf for him. He agreed immediately, and came back 2 days later to pick it up. When he tasted it, he closed his eyes and smiled. "This is it," he said. "This is exactly what I remember." We started talking after that. He told me about his grandmother, about growing up in California, about how food memories were the strongest ones he had. I told him about learning to bake, about the satisfaction of creating something with my own hands. He came back every day of his trip, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes to try whatever new pastry I had made. On his last day in Milwaukee, he asked for my number. I gave it to him, not really expecting anything to come of it. But he called that same evening, and we talked for 2 hours. He called again the next night, and the night after that. Our relationship developed slowly, carefully. He told me about his work, something in technology, though he was modest about the details. I learned he traveled constantly, that he was based in Seattle, but spent more time in hotels than at home. He seemed lonely, despite his success, and I understood that feeling completely. When he finally told me what he did for a living, I laughed. I thought he was joking. But he pulled up articles on his phone, showed me pictures of himself at industry conferences, proved that he was exactly who he claimed to be. Ethan was the founder and CEO of a major tech company, the kind of company you read about in business magazines. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "Because I wanted you to know me first," he said. "Not what I've built or how much money I have. Just me." I appreciated that more than he knew. I had spent my entire life being judged for what I wasn't. Ethan saw me for who I was and seemed to like that person. We made our relationship work despite the distance. He flew to Milwaukee whenever he could, often just for a weekend. I visited Seattle twice, marveling at his sleek apartment with its view of the water. We talked every night, shared our days, built something real. But I kept him separate from my family. I couldn't bear the thought of Mom tearing him down the way she tore down everything else in my life. What if she said something so awful that he started to see me differently? What if her constant criticism finally revealed some truth about me that would make him leave? Ethan didn't understand my reluctance. He grew up in a warm, supportive family. His parents encouraged his dreams, celebrated his successes. The concept of a mother who actively worked to undermine her daughter's happiness was foreign to him. "I want to meet them," he said one night in November. "I want to be part of your whole life, not just the parts you show me." I tried to explain what my family was like, particularly Mom. I told him about the constant criticism, the comparisons to Diane, the public humiliations. He listened carefully, then took my hand. "Let me be there with you," he said. "You shouldn't have to face that alone." So I agreed to bring him to Christmas dinner. I planned it carefully. I would arrive early to help with preparations, and he would come later after everyone had settled in. That way I could assess Mom's mood, maybe even warn him if things were particularly bad. The plan fell apart the moment I walked into the house and heard Mom already destroying me in front of the entire family. Standing there with that pie in my hands, listening to my mother call me the family failure, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger exactly, though there was plenty of that. It was more like clarity. A sudden, sharp understanding that this pattern had to end. I had texted Ethan as soon as I arrived, telling him to wait before coming in. Now I pulled out my phone and sent another message. "Come now. It's time." Mom was still holding court, seemingly energized by her audience. "I don't know what I'm supposed to tell people," she continued. "When they ask about my daughters, I can brag about Diane all day. But Charlene, what am I supposed to say about a 35-year-old baker with no prospects?" My Aunt Patricia shifted uncomfortably. "Well, some people are late bloomers." "Late bloomers?" Mom laughed. "Patricia, she's not going to bloom. This is it. This is all she'll ever be." Diane finally spoke up, her voice soft. "Mom, maybe we should talk about something else." "Why? Because the truth hurts?" Mom turned to look at me directly for the first time. Maybe if someone had been honest with her years ago, she would have made better choices. But no. Everyone wanted to be supportive and encouraging. Look where that got us. I set the pie down on the entry table. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or embarrassment. I was done being afraid of her. "You're right," I said, and the room went quiet. Mom looked startled. I rarely responded to her attacks. I did make choices. I chose to build a business from the ground up. I chose to work 16-hour days to make sure that business succeeded. I chose to create something I'm proud of, even though you've never once acknowledged it. Mom's expression hardened. "Don't be dramatic. You work at a bakery." "I own the bakery," I corrected. "I have for 5 years. But you've never cared enough to ask about my life, so you wouldn't know that. Owning a bakery isn't exactly what? Impressive, successful, good enough for you?" I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but for once I didn't care. "Nothing I do will ever be good enough for you because I'm not Diane. I don't have the right kind of marriage or the right kind of life. I'm just me, and that's never been acceptable to you." The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. Mom looked annoyed at the interruption. "Who else is coming? Everyone's already here." I walked to the door, my heart pounding. When I opened it, Ethan stood there in a perfectly tailored suit, holding a bottle of expensive wine. He looked calm, confident, and completely unbothered by the chaos he was about to walk into. "Hi," he said softly, "just for me. You okay?" I nodded, taking his hand. I am now. We walked back into the living room together. Mom was still standing in the center of the room, her face showing irritation at having her moment interrupted. Diane had moved to the couch, looking worried. The rest of the family seemed frozen, unsure what was happening. Everyone, I said, my voice stronger now. I'd like you to meet someone. This is Ethan. He smiled warmly at the room, completely at ease. It's great to finally meet Charlene's family. I've heard so much about all of you. Mom's eyes narrowed as she assessed him. I could see her taking in the expensive suit, the confident posture, the way he held himself. She was trying to figure out what angle to use, how to diminish him the way she diminished everything else in my life. And what do you do, Ethan? She asked, her tone suggesting she expected something disappointing. I work in technology, he said simply. Technology, Mom repeated, as if the word was distasteful. So you're one of those computer people? In a way, Ethan said, still smiling. I founded a company about 12 years ago. We develop software solutions for healthcare systems. It's been pretty successful. My Uncle George, who had been quiet until now, suddenly sat up straighter. Wait, what company? Ethan named it, and I watched Uncle George's face change. He was a hospital administrator, and apparently he knew exactly what Ethan's company did. You're kidding, Uncle George said. We use your software at the hospital. It's revolutionary. You've saved healthcare systems millions in efficiency costs. Mom's smile had frozen on her face. She looked between Ethan and Uncle George, trying to understand what was happening. Diane was staring at Ethan with wide eyes, and I could see her pulling out her phone under the table, probably to Google him. Well, that's nice, Mom said, her voice tight. How did you two meet? At Charlene's bakery, Ethan said, and his smile widened. I tried her sourdough and fell in love. With the bread first, then with her. Her bakery, Mom said flatly. The place she owns, yes. It's an amazing business. The way she's grown it over the past 5 years, the loyalty she's built with customers, the quality of her products. It's really impressive. He looked at me with genuine warmth. She's brilliant at what she does. I watched something crumble in Mom's expression. It wasn't remorse or regret. She wasn't capable of that. It was the realization that her favorite weapon, my supposed failure, was no longer available to her. I wasn't single and desperate. I wasn't unsuccessful. I wasn't the disappointment she had spent years telling everyone I was. Diane had found something on her phone. She looked up at me, then at Ethan, her mouth slightly open. He's worth hundreds of millions, she whispered to Mom, though everyone heard it. The room went completely silent. Mom's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, then something that looked almost like pain. But it wasn't the pain of regret or shame. It was the pain of losing control, of watching her carefully constructed narrative crumble in front of everyone. Hundreds of millions? She repeated, her voice strained. She turned to me, and for the first time in years, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. Charlene, why didn't you tell us? Tell you what? I asked, keeping my voice level. That I was seeing someone? You've never been interested in my life before. Why would this be different? That's not fair, Mom said, but there was no conviction in her words. She was already pivoting. I could see it happening. She was looking for a way to make this about her, to twist it, so she came out looking like the victim or the hero. We've always cared about you. Ethan squeezed my hand gently. He had been watching the exchange with interest, and I could tell he was starting to understand what I had been dealing with all these years. Diane was still staring at her phone, scrolling through articles. He was on the cover of Forbes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And Business Week. And she looked up at Mom. How did we not know about this? Because Charlene didn't tell us, Mom said quickly, regaining some of her composure. She turned to the rest of the family with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You know how private she can be, always keeping secrets. I felt something inside me snap. Private? Mom, I've been bringing you into my life for 35 years, and you've spent every single one of those years telling me it wasn't good enough. I didn't tell you about Ethan because I knew you'd find some way to ruin it. That's ridiculous, Mom said. But she was looking at Ethan now, not me. Her whole demeanor had changed. The contempt was gone, replaced by something almost obsequious. Ethan, please don't think badly of our family. Charlene can be so sensitive sometimes. We've always supported her, haven't we? She looked around the room for confirmation. My Aunt Patricia looked uncomfortable. Uncle George was focused on his drink. Diane was still absorbed in her phone. Nobody spoke up to agree with Mom, and I saw her panic slightly at the lack of support. Ethan's voice was polite, but cool when he responded. Actually, from what Charlene has told me, you've spent years criticizing her choices and diminishing her accomplishments. She mentioned that you called her a failure about 5 minutes before I arrived. Mom's face flushed. I was just joking. We joke in this family, don't we? She looked at me desperately. Charlene knows I don't mean anything by it. But you do mean it, I said quietly. You've meant every word. Every comparison to Diane. Every comment about my age or my job or my life. You've spent years trying to make me feel worthless. I was trying to motivate you, Mom protested, to push you to be better. Better than what? Better than myself? I built a successful business. I created something meaningful. But you never saw that because you were too busy being disappointed that I wasn't living the exact life you wanted me to live. Diane finally looked up from her phone. Charlene, I had no idea you felt this way. How could you know? I turned to my sister. You were too busy being perfect, and I'm not blaming you for that. You found someone you love. You have a family. You're happy. That's wonderful. But Mom used your life as a weapon against me, and you never once told her to stop. Diane looked stricken. I thought it was just how she was. I didn't think... You didn't think it hurt? I finished for her. Of course it hurt, but nobody cared enough to stop it. Mom was recovering now, finding her footing again. This is typical, she said, her voice gaining strength. I try to help, to guide, and suddenly I'm the villain. Maybe if you had listened to me years ago, you wouldn't have wasted so much time at that bakery. Ethan's hand tightened on mine. The bakery that Charlene built into a thriving business? The one where we met because her reputation for quality brought me through the door? That bakery? I'm sure it's nice, Mom said dismissively. But let's be honest. If she had pursued a real career... She has a real career, Ethan interrupted, his voice still polite but with an edge to it now. She owns a business that employs 12 people. She's expanded twice in 5 years. She's built relationships with suppliers and customers that most business owners would envy. What about that isn't real? Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. I just think she could have done more with her potential. You mean she could have done what you wanted her to do, Ethan said. Found a husband by 30, had kids, lived in the suburbs like your other daughter. But Charlene chose her own path, and it's a good one. I had never had someone defend me like this. Ethan wasn't being aggressive or mean. He was simply stating facts, pushing back against Mom's narrative with quiet certainty. And I could see it was driving her crazy. Ethan, you seem like a wonderful man, Mom said, switching tactics again. And I'm so happy that you and Charlene found each other. Maybe now she'll finally settle down, start a family. It's not too late. Mom, I said, my voice sharp. Stop. What? I'm just saying that now that you have someone like Ethan, You can finally have the life you should have had years ago. You can sell that bakery, be a proper wife. I'm not selling anything, I said. And I'm not changing my life to fit your vision of what it should be. I'm happy with who I am and what I've built. Mom laughed, but it sounded forced. Oh, Charlene, don't be silly. Once you're married to someone like Ethan, you won't need to work. You can finally relax, have babies, be a real woman. The room erupted. Uncle George looked horrified. Aunt Patricia actually gasped. Diane said, "Mom," in a shocked voice. But it was Ethan who spoke, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, and I noticed he used my last name, not his. Charlene is already a real woman, a successful, talented, remarkable woman, and I fell in love with her exactly as she is. If you can't see that, if you can't appreciate your own daughter's worth, then that's your failure, not hers. Mom stared at him, her face pale. Nobody had ever spoken to her like that. She was used to being the one in control, the one who decided what was acceptable and what wasn't. But Ethan had just publicly called her out, and there was no way for her to spin it. "I think we should leave," Mom said suddenly, looking at my father, who had been silent through all of this. "We clearly aren't welcome here." "This is your house," I pointed out. "Then maybe you should leave," Mom snapped, her composure finally breaking completely. "You and your billionaire boyfriend. Go back to your bakery and your little life." "Gladly," I said. I looked at Ethan. "Let's go." We were almost to the door when Diane called out. "Charlene, wait." I turned to see my sister standing up, her face conflicted. She looked at Mom, then back at me. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have said something years ago. I should have defended you." "But you didn't," I said simply. "It wasn't meant to be cruel, just honest." "I know." Diane's eyes were starting to tear up. "I thought if I stayed quiet, if I didn't rock the boat, everyone would be okay. But I was wrong. And I'm sorry." Mom made a dismissive sound. "Diane, don't apologize. You have nothing to be sorry for. Charlene is just being dramatic as usual." "No, Mom," Diane said, surprising everyone. "She's not being dramatic. You've been awful to her for years, and I let it happen because it was easier than standing up to you." Mom's face went red. "How dare you speak to me that way? After everything I've done for you, for this family." "You've done a lot for me," Diane agreed. "But you've been cruel to Charlene, and it needs to stop." "I won't stand here and be attacked by my own children," Mom said, her voice shaking with anger. "First, Charlene brings this stranger into our home and turns everyone against me, and now you're joining her? This is unbelievable." Ethan spoke again, his voice measured. "I'm not a stranger trying to turn anyone against you. I'm simply someone who loves your daughter and can see clearly what you've been doing to her. And I think deep down, everyone in this room can see it too." I looked around and saw that he was right. Aunt Patricia was nodding slightly. Uncle George couldn't meet Mom's eyes. Even my father, who never got involved in conflicts, looked troubled. "You're all crazy," Mom said. "I've been a good mother, a devoted mother. I've sacrificed everything for my family." "You've been controlling," I said. "There's a difference. You didn't sacrifice for us. You used us to make yourself feel important. And when I didn't follow your script, you punished me for it." "That's not true," Mom insisted. But there was desperation in her voice now. She was losing the room, losing the audience that had always validated her behavior. "Diane, tell them. Tell them how much I've done for you." Diane looked uncomfortable. "You have been there for me, Mom. But Charlene's right. You've treated her differently. And it's not okay." Mom turned on her. "You ungrateful child. After everything, the wedding I paid for, the down payment on your house, all the babysitting. which you held over my head every time I didn't do exactly what you wanted, Diane said quietly. I love you, Mom, but you're not always easy to love. The room was silent. Mom looked around wildly, seeking support, but found none. Everyone was looking at her with varying degrees of discomfort or pity. She had built her identity on being the matriarch, the one everyone deferred to, and now that foundation was cracking. Fine, she said finally, her voice brittle. Leave, all of you. See if I care. I don't need any of you. Nobody moved. We all stood there, frozen in the awkwardness of the moment. Then my father spoke for the first time. Margaret, he said quietly, maybe we should talk about this. Really talk about it. Talk about what? Mom snapped. About how our daughters are turning on us? About how some tech millionaire shows up and suddenly I'm the villain? About how you've treated Charlene, Dad said. Because she's right. You have been cruel to her. Mom stared at him like he'd slapped her. You're taking her side? I'm not taking sides, Dad said. I'm just acknowledging the truth. And the truth is that you've been unfair to Charlene for a long time. I can't believe this, Mom said. I can't believe my own family is ganging up on me. We're not ganging up on you, I said, and I was surprised to find I felt sorry for her in that moment. Not enough to take back what I'd said, but enough to soften my voice slightly. We're just asking you to see how you've hurt me. That's all. Hurt you? Mom's voice rose again. I pushed you to be better. That's what mothers do. No, Mom. You tore me down. There's a difference between pushing someone to grow and making them feel worthless. Mom shook her head violently. I never made you feel worthless. You're just too sensitive. You always have been. Ethan stepped forward slightly. Can I ask you something, Mrs. Anderson? Do you even know what Charlene's bakery is called? Mom blinked. What? Of course I... She stopped, her face going blank. What's it called? Ethan pressed gently. The silence stretched out. Mom's mouth opened, closed. She looked at me, then away. I don't see what that has to do with anything. You don't know, Ethan said. And it wasn't a question. Your daughter has owned a business for 5 years, and you don't even know its name. I'm busy, Mom said defensively. I can't remember every little detail. It's not a little detail, I said. It's my life. It's what I do every day. It's what I'm proud of. And you've never cared enough to even ask what it's called. That's not fair, Mom protested weakly. I've had a lot going on. The bakery is called Rising Sun, Ethan said. She chose that name because she wanted to symbolize new beginnings. She opens at 5 every morning to prepare fresh bread for her customers. She knows most of them by name. She's built something real and meaningful, and you've never acknowledged it. Mom's face was pale now. She looked around the room again, but this time I saw something different in her expression. Not anger or defensiveness. Fear. She was afraid of losing control. Afraid of being seen as the person she actually was, instead of the person she pretended to be. I think we should go, I said to Ethan. There's nothing more to say here. We turned to leave again, and this time Diane didn't stop us. But as we reached the door, Mom called out one more time. Charlene. I paused but didn't turn around. You'll regret this, she said, and her voice was cold. You'll see. You think you're better than us now because of him, but money doesn't change who you are. You'll always be the disappointment, no matter who you're with. I turned around slowly. Ethan tensed beside me, but I put my hand on his arm. This was my moment. You're wrong, I said calmly. I'm not a disappointment, I never was. The only person disappointed here is you. Disappointed that you can't control me anymore. Disappointed that your narrative about my failure doesn't work when I'm actually successful. That's your problem, Mom. Not mine. I didn't wait for her response. Ethan and I walked out into the cold December evening, the door closing behind us with a definitive click. The moment we stepped off the porch, I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even realize was there. Ethan pulled me close. You okay? I'm better than okay, I said, and I meant it. I'm free. We got into his rental car, and he started driving. I assumed he was taking me back to my apartment, but instead, he drove to the lakefront. Milwaukee was beautiful at night, especially in winter. The lights from the city reflected off the frozen water, creating a peaceful scene that was exactly what I needed. Want to talk about it? Ethan asked after we'd been sitting in comfortable silence for a few minutes. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Part of me feels guilty for confronting her like that, but mostly I just feel relieved. You shouldn't feel guilty, Ethan said. She needed to hear it. They all needed to hear it. Did you see her face when you asked about the bakery's name? I couldn't help but laugh a little. She really had no idea. That told me everything I needed to know about her, Ethan said. She doesn't know you at all, Charlene. She's been so busy trying to make you into what she wanted that she never bothered to see who you actually are. I leaned my head against his shoulder. Thank you for coming tonight, for defending me. I've never had anyone do that before. You shouldn't have to defend yourself against your own mother, Ethan said. That's not normal. That's not love. We sat there for a while longer, watching the lights on the water. My phone buzzed several times. Texts from Diane, from Aunt Patricia, even one from Uncle George. I didn't look at them yet. I needed this moment of peace. Finally, Ethan spoke again. What do you want to do now? What do you mean? I mean about your family, about your mother. Do you want to try to fix this? Or are you done? I thought about it. A week ago, even a day ago, I might have said I wanted to fix it, that I wanted Mom to apologize, to change, to become the mother I always wished she could be. But sitting there in the car, feeling the weight of 35 years of criticism finally lift off my shoulders, I realized something. I'm done, I said. I'm done trying to earn her love. I'm done making excuses for her behavior. I'm done letting her make me feel small. Are you sure? Ethan asked gently. Because once you make that choice, I'm sure, I interrupted. I've spent my whole life trying to be enough for her, and it was never going to work because the problem was never with me. It was with her, and I can't fix that. Ethan kissed the top of my head. Then I support you. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. We drove back to my apartment in comfortable silence. When we got there, I finally looked at my phone. Diane had sent several messages. I'm so sorry. I should have stood up for you years ago. Can we talk? I understand if you hate me. I stared at the messages for a long time. Part of me was angry at Diane. She had stood by while Mom tore me down for years. She had benefited from being the golden child while I took all the hits. But another part of me remembered that she was a victim too, just in a different way. Mom's love had always come with conditions, even for her. I texted back. I don't hate you, but I need some time. Her response was immediate. I understand. I love you. I didn't respond to that. I wasn't ready to yet. Ethan stayed with me that night. We ordered takeout and watched old movies, and I felt more at peace than I had in years. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Mom. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the answer button. Ethan looked at me questioningly. You don't have to answer it, he said. I know. But I was curious. I answered and put it on speaker. Charlene? Mom's voice sounded strange, strained. We need to talk. What about? About tonight. About everything. There was a pause. Maybe I was a bit harsh. A bit harsh? I repeated, incredulous. Mom, you called me a failure in front of the entire family. I was joking, she said, but there was no conviction in it. You know how I am. Yes, I do know how you are. That's the problem. Don't be dramatic, Mom said, and just like that, the familiar dynamic was back. I'm trying to apologize here. No, you're not, I said. You're trying to make this go away without actually taking responsibility for anything you've done. That's not true, Mom protested. I'm calling you, aren't I? I'm trying to make peace. Why now? I asked. Is it because you're genuinely sorry, or is it because you're embarrassed about what happened in front of the family? Or maybe it's because you realize that my boyfriend has money and suddenly I'm worth your time? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. I thought so, I said. Mom, until you can actually acknowledge how you've treated me, really acknowledge it, not just brush it off as being harsh or joking, we don't have anything to talk about. Charlene, don't be like this. I'm your mother. Being my mother doesn't give you the right to treat me however you want, I said. It doesn't give you permission to tear me down, to compare me to Diane, to make me feel worthless for not living the exact life you wanted me to live. I never made you feel worthless, Mom said, and she actually sounded like she believed it. You're being too sensitive. And you're being delusional, I said, surprising myself with my bluntness. But that's not my problem anymore. I'm done trying to make you see what you've done. I'm done trying to be enough for you. So what? You're just going to cut me out of your life, after everything I've done for you. What have you done for me, Mom? Besides criticize and belittle me? Besides make me feel like a disappointment for 35 years? I took a deep breath. I'm not cutting you out, but I'm also not going to keep subjecting myself to your abuse. If you ever want a real relationship with me, you know what you need to do. You need to actually be sorry. Not sorry that you got called out, not sorry that things are uncomfortable now. Sorry for how you've treated me. This is ridiculous, Mom said, her voice turning cold again. You're throwing away your family over nothing. It's not nothing to me, I said. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up before she could respond. The week after Christmas was strange. I went back to work at the bakery, falling into my familiar routine of early mornings and the comforting smell of fresh bread. But everything felt different now. Lighter somehow, like I'd been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. Ethan had to fly back to Seattle for meetings, but we talked every night. He asked how I was doing, if I'd heard from my family. I told him about Mom's phone call, about how she couldn't even give me a real apology. I'm proud of you, he said, for standing up for yourself. I should have done it years ago, I admitted. Maybe, but you did it when you were ready. That's what matters. Diane texted me several times throughout the week. Nothing pushy, just small messages letting me know she was thinking about me. On Thursday, she asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, curious about what she wanted to say. We met at a cafe downtown, neutral territory. Diane looked tired when she arrived, her perfect facade cracking slightly. She ordered a latte and sat across from me, fidgeting with her cup. Thank you for coming, she said. Of course. I've been thinking a lot about Christmas, Diane continued, about everything that happened, and about all the years before that. She looked up at me, her eyes red. I was a coward, Charlene. I saw how Mom treated you, and I did nothing. Why? I asked. It wasn't accusatory, just genuine curiosity. Why didn't you ever say anything? Diane was quiet for a moment. Because I was afraid she'd turn on me. I saw what she did to you, and I thought if I just stayed perfect, if I did everything right, I could avoid it. So I let you take all the hits while I stayed safe. That's honest, at least, I said. It's also pathetic, Diane said. You were my sister. I should have protected you. Instead, I used your pain as a shield. I stirred my coffee, processing her words. Part of me wanted to tell her it was okay, to smooth things over like I always did. But I was done doing that. It did hurt, I said finally, watching you get everything while I got nothing. But I never hated you for it, Diane. I knew it wasn't your fault that Mom chose you as her favorite. But I benefited from it, Diane said. I took advantage of it. Every time she compared us, every time she held me up as the example of what you should be, I felt special, important. And I never stopped to think about what that was doing to you. So, what changed? I asked. Why speak up now? Diane smiled sadly, because I saw you walk out that door with someone who actually sees you, who actually values you. And I realized that all these years, I've been playing this game with Mom, trying to be perfect, trying to make her happy. But you were the one who actually won. You built something real. You found someone who loves you for who you are. And I'm still just trying to get Mom's approval. Diane. No, let me finish, she said. I've been thinking about my life, my marriage. Gregory and I, we're not happy. We haven't been for a long time. But I stay because leaving would disappoint Mom. I have the kids, the house, the perfect life. And I'm miserable. I hadn't expected this. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Don't be sorry for me, Diane said. I made my choices. I chose to play Mom's game, and this is where it got me. But you chose yourself. You walked away from her approval and built your own life. I admire that. We talked for another hour, really talked in a way we hadn't since we were kids. Diane told me about the cracks in her marriage, about how Gregory was having an affair, but she stayed because divorce would be admitting failure. I told her about building the bakery, about the scared but determined woman I'd been 5 years ago when I took out that loan. When we finally stood to leave, Diane hugged me tightly. I'm sorry, she whispered. For all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. I know, I said, and thank you for saying it. Are you going to forgive Mom? She asked as we walked to the door. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe someday, but not until she actually understands what she did wrong. She won't, Diane said. She can't see it. She'll never admit she was wrong. Then I guess we have our answer, I said. We parted ways on the street, and I watched Diane walk to her car. She looked smaller somehow, less perfect, more human. I hoped she'd find her own way out of Mom's shadow, but I knew I couldn't do it for her. Everyone had to make that journey themselves. Back at my apartment, I found a package waiting. Inside was a handwritten note from Ethan and a velvet box. My heart started racing as I opened the box, but it wasn't what I expected. Inside was a beautiful necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a sunrise. The note read, "For rising sun and for new beginnings. I love you, E." I put the necklace on and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different than she had a week ago. Stronger, freer, happier. January came, bringing bitter cold and a fresh start. The bakery was busy with people returning to work after the holidays, wanting their familiar morning routines. I threw myself into developing new recipes, expanding the menu. My staff noticed the change in me. I was more confident, more decisive. Whatever happened over Christmas, my assistant manager Helen said one morning, "It was good for you." I smiled. It really was. Ethan came back to Milwaukee for a long weekend in mid-January. We spent most of it at my apartment, cooking together and talking about the future. On Sunday morning, as we sat drinking coffee, he brought up something I'd been avoiding thinking about. "Have you heard from your mom?" "She's texted a few times," I admitted. "Mostly just acting like nothing happened." asking when I'm coming over for dinner, that sort of thing. And I haven't responded. I don't know what to say to someone who refuses to acknowledge reality. Ethan was quiet for a moment. You know you don't owe her anything, right? You don't owe her forgiveness or a relationship or even an explanation. I know, I said. But she's still my mother. Part of me wants to believe she'll change. People don't change unless they want to, Ethan said gently. And from what you've told me, your mom doesn't think she's done anything wrong. He was right, of course. Mom had sent texts like, "When are you going to stop this silly fight?" and "I miss my daughter." But never "I'm sorry" or "I was wrong." Never anything that acknowledged what she'd actually done. The following week, Aunt Patricia called me. "Charlene, honey, I need to tell you something." "What's wrong?" "It's your mother. She's been telling everyone that you're being manipulated, that Ethan has turned you against your family." I laughed, but it was bitter. Of course she is. She can't possibly admit that the problem is her behavior, so she has to find someone else to blame. "I just thought you should know," Aunt Patricia said. "Some people are believing her. You know how she can be. Very convincing when she wants to be. Let her tell whatever story she wants," I said. "The people who matter know the truth." "I know the truth," Aunt Patricia said quietly. "I've known for years how she treated you. I'm ashamed I never spoke up." "Why didn't you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Same reason as everyone else, I suppose. It was easier not to. Margaret has always been difficult. Standing up to her means becoming her target, and nobody wanted that." She paused. "But that's not an excuse. You deserved better from all of us." After we hung up, I sat thinking about Mom's new narrative. Of course, Ethan was the villain in her story. She couldn't accept that I had chosen to stand up for myself, so she had to create a scenario where I was the victim of manipulation. It was almost funny in its predictability. But the real blow came a few days later when Diane called, sounding panicked. "Charlene, Mom's planning something." "What do you mean?" "She's organizing a family intervention. She's calling everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins, and telling them you're in an abusive relationship, that Ethan has isolated you from your family and she needs to save you." I felt anger surge through me. "She's doing what?" "It gets worse. She's saying that if everyone comes together and confronts you, you'll see the truth. She's planning it for this Sunday at the house." "I can't believe this," I said, though part of me could absolutely believe it. This was exactly the kind of thing Mom would do. Turn herself into the hero, make me the victim who needed saving, and completely ignore the actual issues. "What are you going to do?" Diane asked. "I'm going to end this," I said. "Once and for all." I called Ethan immediately and told him what was happening. His response was immediate. "Let's go. Let's go to this intervention and set the record straight." "Ethan, it's going to be ugly." "I don't care. She's crossed a line. Telling people you're being abused? That's not just insulting to you. It's insulting to people who actually are in abusive situations." He was right. Mom had gone too far. It was one thing to criticize me in private or even in front of family. But spreading lies about Ethan, painting him as an abuser to manipulate the family, that was something else entirely. I spent the rest of the week preparing. I gathered evidence, bank statements from the bakery showing its success, the loan documents from when I bought it, photos of awards the bakery had won. I also reached out to several family members privately, people like Uncle George and Aunt Patricia who had witnessed Mom's behavior. By the time Sunday arrived, I was ready. Ethan flew in Saturday night, and we drove to my parents' house together. The driveway was full of cars. Mom had really pulled out all the stops, getting nearly the entire extended family there. "Ready?" Ethan asked as we sat in the car. Ready, I said. We walked to the door together. I didn't bother knocking, just walked right in. The living room was packed with people. They all turned to look at us, their expressions ranging from concern to curiosity to embarrassment. And there, standing in the center of it all like a conductor before an orchestra, was Mom. "Charlene," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Thank God you're here. We need to talk about what's happening to you." I looked around the room, making eye contact with each person. Then I smiled. "Yes, Mom. Let's talk about what's been happening. Let's talk about all of it." Mom faltered slightly at my tone, but she recovered quickly. "Everyone here cares about you, Charlene. We're worried about your relationship with this man." "This man has a name," Ethan said calmly. "I'm Ethan, in case anyone's forgotten." "Of course," Mom said, though she didn't look at him. "Ethan, we're not attacking you. We're just concerned about how quickly this relationship has progressed, and how Charlene has cut herself off from her family." "I haven't cut myself off from anyone," I said. "I set a boundary. There's a difference." Uncle George cleared his throat. "Charlene, your mother says you've been acting strangely, that you've changed." "I have changed," I agreed. "I've stopped accepting abuse. Is that what concerns everyone?" There was uncomfortable shifting in the room. Aunt Patricia spoke up. "Margaret, maybe we should—" "Patricia, please," Mom interrupted. "Let me handle this." She turned back to me, her expression shifting to something that might have passed for maternal concern. "Sweetheart, I know you think I've been hard on you, but everything I've done has been out of love. And now I'm afraid that Ethan has taken advantage of your vulnerability." "My vulnerability?" I repeated. "You mean the vulnerability you created by spending 35 years telling me I was worthless?" "That's not what I did," Mom protested, looking around for support. "I pushed you to be better. That's what parents do." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. "I've been recording our conversations for the past 3 years," I said. "Would you like me to play some of them, so everyone can hear exactly what kind of pushing you did?" Mom's face went white. "You recorded me?" "I did. I wanted proof of what was happening because I knew you'd deny it, just like you're doing now." I looked around the room. At last Thanksgiving, Mom told me I was pathetic for not having children. At Easter, she said no decent man would want me because I was too old. At my birthday dinner last year, she told me I was wasting my life. "That's taken out of context," Mom said desperately. "Is it?" I pulled out a small speaker I'd brought and connected my phone. "Let's listen, shall we?" I played a clip from Thanksgiving. Mom's voice came through clearly. "Look at Diane with her family. That's what a woman is supposed to look like at 35. Not alone and desperate like you." The room was silent. I played another clip, then another. With each one, Mom looked smaller, more cornered. Family members who had come expecting to stage an intervention were now looking at her with dawning horror. "Stop it," Mom finally said, her voice shaking. "Stop playing those." "Why?" I asked. "Because it's embarrassing? Because everyone can now hear what I've been dealing with for years? Because your narrative about me being manipulated by Ethan falls apart when they hear you calling me a failure, a disappointment, pathetic?" "I was frustrated," Mom said. "I was trying to help you." "You were being cruel," I said flatly. "And you were doing it deliberately. You enjoyed it. You enjoyed making me feel small because it made you feel powerful." Diane stood up from where she'd been sitting quietly. "She's right, Mom. I've heard you say worse things when it was just us. You've been horrible to Charlene." "Diane, don't you turn on me, too," Mom said, panic creeping into her voice. "I'm not turning on you," Diane said. "I'm just finally admitting the truth. You've been abusive to Charlene for years, and we all let it happen." Uncle George spoke up. Margaret, I think we need to have an honest conversation here. Not about Charlene's relationship, but about your behavior. Mom looked around wildly, seeking an ally but found none. Even Dad was looking at her with an expression I'd never seen before. Disappointment. This is ridiculous, Mom said, her voice rising. I call a family meeting to help my daughter, and you all turn it into an attack on me? I'm the victim here. No, Mom, I said quietly. You're not the victim. You never were. You were the perpetrator. And the only reason we're all here is because you couldn't handle the fact that I finally stood up to you. Ethan stepped forward. Mrs. Anderson, I need to say something. I love your daughter. I love her strength, her kindness, her talent. I love who she is, exactly as she is. And nothing you say or do will change that. But I will not stand by while you spread lies about our relationship to manipulate your family. I wasn't, Mom started, but Aunt Patricia cut her off. Margaret, enough. We've all heard the recordings. We've all seen how you treat Charlene. This needs to stop. Mom looked around the room one more time, and I saw the moment she realized she'd lost. Not just this battle, but the war. She'd overplayed her hand, and everyone could see her for what she really was. Fine, she said, her voice cold. If that's how you all feel, then leave. All of you. I don't need any of you. Actually, Mom, I said, we're already gone. Some of us left a long time ago. You just didn't notice. Ethan and I turned and walked out. This time, several people followed us. Diane, Aunt Patricia, Uncle George, a few cousins. We stood in the driveway together, nobody quite sure what to say. Finally, Uncle George spoke. I'm sorry, Charlene, for all of it. Thank you, I said simply. In the months that followed, Mom never apologized. She told anyone who would listen that I had turned the family against her, that I was cruel and ungrateful. But her audience grew smaller as more people realized the truth. Dad eventually moved into his own apartment, tired of her bitterness and blame. Diane filed for divorce and started rebuilding her life. Several family members stopped speaking to Mom entirely, unwilling to tolerate her manipulation anymore. Mom ended up exactly where she'd always feared, alone, because she'd driven everyone away. Not through honesty or standing up for herself, but through years of cruelty masked as concern. She'd built her identity on control and criticism, and when those tools no longer worked, she had nothing left. As for me, I married Ethan in a small ceremony 6 months later, surrounded by the people who actually loved and supported us. The bakery continued to thrive, and I never doubted my choices again. Looking back on that Christmas dinner, I realized the greatest revenge wasn't in exposing Mom or proving my success. It was in finally choosing myself, in walking away from her approval and building a life I was proud of. She'd spent 35 years trying to make me feel worthless. But in the end, I discovered my worth had never depended on her validation at all.